I never thought I'd be the kind of woman standing in a courthouse at 63 years old, watching my daughter's marriage crumble like a sandcastle under a storm. But there I was, in a grey linen blazer that suddenly felt too tight around my chest, my hands trembling as I gripped my leather handbag, the one my late husband Gerald had given me on our 30th anniversary. Inside that bag was an envelope. Just a simple manila envelope. But what it contained would change everything. Before I tell you what happened in that courtroom, before I tell you about the moment I watched a grown man's face drain of every ounce of color, I need you to understand how we got there. And if you're watching this from wherever you are in the world, maybe from your living room in Texas, or your kitchen in Ohio, or scrolling on your phone during a lunch break in Seattle, leave a comment and let me know where you're from. Because this story, it could happen anywhere, to anyone. Maybe it's already happened to you. My name is Patricia Brennan, though most people call me Patty. I'm a retired schoolteacher from Columbus, Ohio, and for most of my life, I believed in fairness, kindness, and the goodness of people. I taught third graders for 37 years. I believed that if you worked hard, treated people right, and raised your children with love, everything would turn out okay. I believed in happy endings. God, was I naive? My daughter Melissa, my only child, my pride and joy, the girl I'd raised alone after Gerald died of a sudden heart attack when she was just 14, had always been smart. Brilliant, even. She graduated summa cum laude from Ohio State, earned her MBA from Northwestern, and by the time she was 32, she was a senior executive at a Fortune 500 company. She bought her own house, drove a sensible but elegant sedan, and had a retirement portfolio that would make most 40-year-olds weep with envy. And then she met Trevor Hayes. Trevor was handsome in that dangerous way, tall, with sandy blonde hair that always looked perfectly tousled, bright blue eyes, and a smile that could charm the birds from the trees. He worked in sales, though I could never quite pin down what he actually sold. He wore expensive suits that I later learned were bought on credit cards he never paid off. He drove a leased BMW. He took Melissa to fancy restaurants and surprised her with weekend trips to wine country. He was everything I'd raised my daughter to be wary of. But Melissa was 34 when they met, and I think she was tired of being careful. Tired of being the responsible one, the successful one, the woman who had it all together. Trevor made her feel spontaneous, free, young. When she told me they were engaged after only 8 months of dating, I felt my stomach drop like I'd missed a step going downstairs. I smiled. I hugged her. I said all the right things. But that night, alone in my small ranch house with Gerald's photo on the mantel, I cried until my ribs ached. The wedding was beautiful. I'll give Trevor that. He knew how to put on a show. 200 guests, a live band, flowers that must have cost more than my first car. Melissa wore my mother's pearls and looked radiant. When she said I do, her voice was strong and sure. When Trevor said those same words, I swear I heard something hollow underneath them, like a drum with no skin. The first year was fine. Good. Even. Trevor got a new job, something in pharmaceutical sales, he said, and they bought a bigger house in Upper Arlington, one of those gorgeous colonials with the wraparound porch. Melissa was happy. She glowed. She talked about maybe having kids soon. Then Gerald's mother passed away. Grandma Irene had been 97, sharp as a tack until the very end. She'd lived through the Depression, raised 4 children on a factory worker's salary, and saved every penny she could. When she died, she left her entire estate to Melissa, her only great-grandchild. $340,000. I remember the day Melissa called to tell me. Her voice was shaking. Mom, I can't believe it. Grandma Irene, she left me everything. That's wonderful, sweetheart, I said, though something in my chest tightened. What are you going to do with it? Trevor says we should invest it. Maybe buy a rental property or put it in stocks. He's been researching. Melissa. I interrupted her, and I could hear the edge in my own voice. That money is yours. Your grandmother left it to you, not to both of you. Make sure you keep it separate. There was a pause. A long one. Mom, we're married. What's mine is his and what's his is mine. That's how marriage works. Not always, honey. Not with inherited money. Keep it in your name. Please. Another pause. Then her voice came back, cooler now. I have to go, Mom. Trevor's calling me. That conversation haunted me for months. But I told myself I was being paranoid, overprotective, one of those mothers who couldn't let go. Melissa was a grown woman. A successful businesswoman. She knew what she was doing. Except she didn't. Because Trevor had a plan. And I didn't find out about it until it was almost too late. The cracks started showing about 18 months after the inheritance. Melissa started cancelling our weekly dinners. When we did see each other, she looked tired, not just physically, but spiritually exhausted, like someone had dimmed her light from the inside. She'd lost weight. She stopped talking about work with that excited passion she used to have. When I asked if everything was okay, she'd smile, that brittle, fake smile that made my heart hurt, and say, "Everything's fine, Mom. Just busy." Then came the Tuesday in October when she showed up at my door at 9 o'clock at night. No phone call. No warning. Just rang the doorbell and stood there in the porch light, mascara streaked down her face, still in her work clothes. "Can I come in?" she whispered. I didn't say anything. I just pulled her inside and held her while she sobbed against my shoulder, her whole body shaking like she was coming apart at the seams. When she could finally speak, the words came out in broken pieces. "He's cheating on me, Mom. Trevor's been cheating on me. For months. Maybe longer." My entire body went cold. "Are you sure?" She laughed, but it was a horrible sound, like glass breaking. I found the messages on his phone. Hundreds of them. He's been seeing someone from his gym. Alana. She's 26. 26. Melissa was 38. He's been taking her to hotels. Expensive ones. Using our credit cards. She looked up at me, and her eyes were so full of pain I could barely stand to meet them. "My credit cards, Mom. I've been paying for him to cheat on me." That's when the rage started. Not the hot, explosive kind, the cold, calculating kind that settles into your bones and doesn't leave. "You're filing for divorce," I said. It wasn't a question. She nodded. "I already called a lawyer." "Good. And Melissa, that inheritance money, please tell me it's still in your name." Her face crumpled. "Most of it is. But Trevor convinced me to put $50,000 into a joint account last year. For household expenses." "Mom, I think it's gone. I think he spent it." $50,000. Gone. That night, after Melissa finally fell asleep in her old bedroom, the one I'd kept exactly as she'd left it when she went to college, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee I didn't drink and stared at the wall. Trevor Hayes was going to pay for what he'd done to my daughter. I just didn't know how yet. If you've ever felt that kind of anger, the kind that makes you want to turn the world upside down to protect someone you love, then you know exactly where I was in that moment. And if you're getting invested in this story, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. Because this is just the beginning. Trust me, you'll want to see how this ends. And check the description box below for more stories like this one. Stories about real people fighting back against the ones who wronged them. The divorce proceedings started in November. Melissa hired a lawyer named Dorothy Klein, a 60-year-old woman with steel gray hair and a reputation for being absolutely ruthless in court. I liked her immediately. "He's going to fight for everything," Dorothy warned us during our first meeting in her downtown office. "Men like Trevor, they don't have anything of their own, so they think they're entitled to everything you've built. He'll claim he deserves half of your savings, half of your 401k, maybe even spousal support." Spousal support. Melissa's voice cracked. "He makes more money than I do." Dorothy's expression was grim. "That's what he says he makes. But I'd bet money his actual income is much lower than what he reports. These guys always have a way of making themselves look broke on paper right before a divorce." She was right. Within 2 weeks, Trevor had mysteriously lost his job and was claiming he had no income. He filed papers demanding temporary spousal support while the divorce was pending. He wanted Melissa to pay his rent, his car payment, his credit card bills. The audacity of it made me physically ill. But here's what Trevor didn't know. I'd been doing my homework. Because that's what retired schoolteachers do when someone threatens their child. We research. We investigate. We become detectives. I started digging into Trevor's background. I called in favors from old friends who knew people who knew people. I spent hours on my computer learning how to search public records. I drove past the luxury apartment complex where Trevor had moved after Melissa kicked him out, watching who came and went. I even, and I'm not proud of this, but I'm not ashamed either, I followed him one Saturday afternoon to a strip mall where he met up with 2 other men at a sports bar, laughing and drinking like he didn't have a care in the world. While my daughter was crying herself to sleep every night, that man was having the time of his life. But I was patient. I waited. I watched. And then I found it. The thing that would change everything. It was a Wednesday afternoon in early December when I stumbled onto what would become Trevor Hayes' downfall. The sky was that particular gray that Ohio does best in winter, heavy and oppressive, like the clouds might just give up and fall to earth. I was sitting at my kitchen table with my laptop, a notepad covered in scribbled notes, and my third cup of coffee going cold beside me. I'd been tracking Trevor's financial history for weeks. Dorothy had subpoenaed his bank records as part of the discovery process, and while Melissa was too emotionally exhausted to look through them, I wasn't. I printed out every page, hundreds of them, and started highlighting patterns. Venmo payments to someone named Lana D at 11 o'clock at night. Cash withdrawals of $200 every Friday. Credit card charges at jewelry stores, high-end restaurants, hotels. And not just recently, this went back years. Years before Melissa had inherited Grandma Irene's money. Years before she'd even met Trevor, based on some of the dates. Trevor Hayes had always been a con artist. Melissa had just been his latest mark. But that Wednesday, I wasn't looking at his spending. I was looking at something else entirely. Something that had been nagging at me since Dorothy mentioned it in passing during our last meeting. I wish we could prove he married Melissa specifically for her money, Dorothy had said, tapping her pen against her legal pad. That would change the entire case. But unless he wrote "I'm marrying this woman for her inheritance" in an email somewhere, it's impossible to prove intent. Intent. That word had stuck in my mind like a burr. I started looking at the timeline more carefully. Trevor and Melissa had started dating in March of 2020. They got engaged in November of that same year. They married in June of 2021. Grandma Irene had died in August of 2021, just 2 months after the wedding. 2 months. Something about that timing felt wrong. Not just coincidental, wrong. I opened up a new tab on my laptop and searched for Grandma Irene's obituary. It popped up immediately. The Cleveland Plain Dealer had published it, along with a beautiful photo of her from her 80th birthday party. I read through the details I already knew. Survived by her son Gerald, deceased, daughter-in-law Patricia, granddaughter Melissa. And then I saw something I'd never noticed before. At the bottom of the obituary, there was a line, asterisk in lieu of flowers. The family asks that donations be made to the Alzheimer's Association, in honor of Irene's long battle with dementia. Asterisk. Dementia. My hands went still on the keyboard. Grandma Irene had been diagnosed with dementia 3 years before she died. I'd known that. I'd visited her in the nursing home every week, watched her slowly forget names and faces and eventually even how to feed herself. It had been heartbreaking. But she'd updated her will 6 months before she died. I knew because she'd called Melissa specifically to tell her. "I want you to have everything, sweetheart," she'd said, her voice still strong even as her mind failed. "You're the only one who visited me. The only one who cared." Melissa had been touched. She'd cried. She'd told Trevor about it that same night. And suddenly, with a clarity that made my stomach turn over, I realized something. Trevor had known about the inheritance before he married Melissa. He'd known, and he'd made sure to lock her down before the money came through. But how could I prove it? How could I prove that Trevor had married my daughter specifically because he knew she was about to inherit a fortune? I sat there staring at my screen, my mind racing. Then I remembered something, a conversation I'd had with Melissa months ago, before everything fell apart. "Trevor's been so stressed about money lately," she'd said. We were having lunch at Panera, and she'd been picking at her salad instead of eating it. "He keeps saying we need to be smart about our finances. He even suggested we get a post-nuptial agreement." A postnup? I'd frowned. "Why would you need that? You're already married." He said it would protect both of us. Make sure everything's fair if anything ever happened. She'd laughed nervously. I told him it felt weird, like we were planning to fail. But he was really insistent. We met with his lawyer about it a few weeks ago. At the time, I'd thought it was odd but not alarming. Now, it sent ice through my veins. Trevor had tried to get Melissa to sign a post-nuptial agreement. After the inheritance. After the money was in her account. A postnup that would have, what? Given him legal claim to money that wasn't his? Protected his interests in case they divorced? I grabbed my phone and called Dorothy. She answered on the second ring. Dorothy, it's Patricia Brennan. I need to know, did Trevor try to get Melissa to sign a post-nuptial agreement? There was a pause. How did you know about that? Melissa mentioned it to me months ago. I forgot about it until just now. Dorothy, do you have a copy of it? I do. Trevor's lawyer submitted it as part of his filing. He's claiming they had a marital agreement that entitles him to a portion of her inheritance. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. When was it signed? According to the document, it was signed in September of 2021. September. 1 month after Grandma Irene died. 1 month after the inheritance hit Melissa's account. Dorothy, I need you to check something for me. I need you to look at the signature date on that postnup and then look at everything else in the file. Bank records, emails, texts, everything. Because I think Trevor tried to backdate something. I think he's lying. Patricia. Dorothy's voice was sharp now, interested. What are you thinking? I'm thinking Trevor knew about that inheritance before he married Melissa. I'm thinking he married her for the money. And I'm thinking that when he realized the money was protected as her separate property, he tried to create a paper trail that would give him legal access to it. But he screwed up somewhere. I can feel it. If you're right. Dorothy trailed off. If you're right, this changes everything. Let me pull the files. I'll call you back. She hung up, and I sat there in my kitchen, my coffee cold, my hands shaking, adrenaline coursing through my body like electricity. I didn't know it yet, but I'd just found the thread that would unravel Trevor's entire scheme. The next few days were torture. Dorothy was combing through everything, but she wouldn't tell me what she was finding. I don't want to get your hopes up until I'm sure, she kept saying. Meanwhile, Melissa was falling apart. The divorce mediation had been scheduled for mid-January, and Trevor's lawyer was playing hardball. They were demanding $50,000 in spousal support, the exact amount of Melissa's inheritance that Trevor had already spent. They were claiming Trevor had given up career opportunities to support Melissa's success and deserved to be compensated. It was all lies. Obvious, blatant lies. But Trevor sold them beautifully. He'd show up to meetings looking haggard and defeated, wearing cheap clothes instead of his usual designer suits. He'd talk about how much he'd loved Melissa, how devastated he was by the divorce, how he just wanted to move on with his life but needed financial help to get back on his feet. I watched him perform, and I wanted to scream. But I kept my mouth shut. Because I was waiting for Dorothy's call. It came on a Friday evening. I was making dinner, chicken soup, the kind Gerald used to love, when my phone rang. Patricia. Dorothy's voice was tight with excitement. I found it. I nearly dropped the ladle. Found what? The mistake. Trevor's mistake. That post-nuptial agreement he submitted. The one supposedly signed in September 2021. Yes. It references account numbers that didn't exist until November of 2021. Melissa opened a new savings account specifically for the inheritance in November. But the postnup talks about all marital funds including but not limited to joint checking account ending in 7834 and joint savings account ending in 3952. That savings account, 3952, wasn't opened until 2 months after the supposed signing date. I felt like I'd been struck by lightning. He backdated it. And he was sloppy. He must have drafted the agreement later and tried to make it look like it was signed earlier, but he included information he couldn't have known at the supposed signing date. Patricia, this is fraud. This is actual, prosecutable fraud. Can we use this in court? Oh, we're going to do more than use it. I'm filing a motion for sanctions. Trevor Hayes tried to defraud the court. When the judge sees this, it's going to blow up his entire case. I sat down hard in one of my kitchen chairs, my legs suddenly weak. When's the next hearing? January 15th. Mediation first, then if that doesn't work, we go straight to the divorce hearing. Patricia, we've got him. We've finally got him. That night, I told Melissa. We sat together on my couch, the same couch where I'd read her bedtime stories when she was little, and I explained everything Dorothy had found. She cried. But this time, they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of relief, and rage, and something that looked almost like hope. He tried to steal from me, she whispered. He actually tried to steal from me. Yes, I said, holding her hand. But he failed. Because he underestimated you. And he definitely underestimated your mother. She laughed through her tears. What are we going to do? I smiled, and I'm not ashamed to say it wasn't a kind smile. We're going to watch him fall. January in Ohio is a special kind of miserable. It's not the romantic, snow globe kind of winter you see in movies. It's gray slush and freezing rain and wind that cuts through every layer of clothing you own. The kind of cold that seeps into your bones and stays there. But I barely felt it as I drove downtown on the morning of January 15th. I was running on pure adrenaline and righteous fury, and nothing, not the icy roads, not the biting wind, not even the knot of anxiety in my stomach, was going to keep me from that courtroom. Melissa was already there when I arrived. She was standing outside the Franklin County Courthouse with Dorothy, both of them bundled in heavy coats, their breath misting in the freezing air. When Melissa saw me, she tried to smile, but I could see the fear in her eyes. "You ready, sweetheart?" I asked, squeezing her gloved hand. "No," she admitted. "But let's do it anyway." We walked inside together, passing through security and heading up to the third floor where the family court was located. The hallway was crowded with lawyers and clients, everyone speaking in hushed voices that echoed off the marble floors. I spotted Trevor almost immediately. He was standing near the courtroom doors with his lawyer, Richard Paulson, a slick-looking man in his 40s with perfect teeth and an expensive suit. Trevor was dressed more humbly, in khakis and a sweater that looked like he'd bought it at Target. Playing the victim, as usual. When he saw us, his face hardened. But then he smiled, that same charming smile that had fooled my daughter 4 years ago, and raised his hand in a little wave. The nerve of this man. Dorothy touched my arm. "Don't react. Don't give him anything. We're in control here, remember that." I nodded, but my hands were clenched into fists inside my coat pockets. We filed into the courtroom. It was smaller than I'd expected, just rows of wooden benches, a judge's bench at the front, and a few tables for the lawyers. There were maybe a dozen other people scattered throughout the room, waiting for their own cases to be called. Everything smelled like old wood and anxiety. Judge Andrea Winters entered at 9:30 sharp. She was a black woman in her early 60s with close-cropped silver hair and reading glasses hanging on a chain around her neck. She had the kind of face that had seen everything twice and wasn't impressed by any of it. "Case number 2024 DR 8847, the bailiff called out. "Hayes versus Hayes, divorce proceedings." We all stood. Melissa was shaking beside me, so I reached over and squeezed her hand again. She squeezed back so hard I thought my bones might crack. Judge Winters looked down at the papers in front of her, then looked up at both tables. "This is a divorce with contested asset division, is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," both lawyers said in unison. "And I understand we had mediation scheduled for this morning, but that fell through." Dorothy stood. "That's correct, Your Honor. The respondent's demands were, quite frankly, unreasonable and based on fraudulent documentation. We believe we need the court's intervention to resolve this matter." Trevor's lawyer, Paulson, jumped up. "Your Honor, that's an inflammatory accusation. My client has been nothing but forthcoming." "Sit down, Mr. Paulson," Judge Winters said mildly. "You'll get your chance. Miss Klein, you want to explain what you mean by fraudulent documentation?" "I do, Your Honor. But perhaps it would be better to address this in the context of the full proceedings." The judge studied Dorothy for a long moment, then nodded. "Very well. Let's begin. Mr. Paulson, your client filed for spousal support and a division of marital assets. Walk me through the basis of your claims." What followed was an hour of legal back and forth that made my head spin. Paulson argued that Trevor had been a supportive spouse who'd sacrificed his own career advancement to support Melissa's success. He claimed Trevor was entitled to spousal support because he was currently unemployed and had no income. He argued that the inheritance Melissa received was partially marital property because Trevor had provided emotional and practical support during the time period when her grandmother was ill. It was such obvious nonsense that I wanted to stand up and scream. But I stayed quiet, watching Judge Winters's face for any reaction. She gave nothing away. Then it was Dorothy's turn. She stood, adjusted her reading glasses, and began systematically dismantling every claim Paulson had made. She presented evidence of Trevor's actual income, not the $0 he'd claimed, but the $20,000 consulting fee he'd received just weeks earlier from a pharmaceutical company, deposited into an account he'd opened in his brother's name. Paulson objected. Judge Winters overruled him. Dorothy presented bank records showing Trevor had been draining the joint checking account for months before Melissa asked for a divorce, spending money on hotels, restaurants, and cash withdrawals that couldn't be accounted for. Paulson objected again. Judge Winters told him to sit down. And then Dorothy brought out the big guns. Your Honor, I need to address the post-nuptial agreement that Mr. Hayes has submitted as evidence of his right to a portion of Ms. Brennan's inheritance. Paulson perked up at this. Yes, Your Honor, that agreement clearly states. Mr. Paulson, Judge Winters said, her voice sharp. I didn't ask you to speak. Go ahead, Ms. Klein. Dorothy approached the bench and handed up a folder. Your Honor, if you'll look at the document Mr. Hayes submitted, you'll notice it's dated September 15, 2021. Mr. Hayes claims he and Ms. Brennan signed this agreement 1 month after her grandmother passed away, establishing how they would handle the inheritance. I see that, Judge Winters said, flipping through the papers. Now, if you'll look at page 3, paragraph 7, you'll see it references specific account numbers, including a joint savings account ending in 3952. I see it. Your Honor, that savings account wasn't opened until November 8, 2021. Almost 2 months after the supposed signing date. Here are the account opening documents from Fifth Third Bank, stamped with the date. She handed up another set of papers. The courtroom went absolutely silent. Judge Winters looked at the bank documents. Then she looked at the post-nuptial agreement. Then she looked directly at Trevor, and even from where I was sitting, I could see her expression harden. Mr. Hayes, she said slowly, did you sign this post-nuptial agreement on September 15, 2021? Trevor stood up, his face flushed. Yes, Your Honor. We both did. We were trying to be responsible. Then how do you explain the fact that this document references a bank account that didn't exist yet? Trevor's mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. He looked at his lawyer. Paulson was frantically flipping through his own copies of the documents, his face going pale. Your Honor, there must be some mistake. Maybe it was a different account, or maybe the date is wrong, or... So you're saying either you backdated this document, or you're lying about when it was signed. Which is it, Mr. Hayes? I watched Trevor's face go through a series of expressions, confusion, anger, fear, and finally, calculation. He was trying to figure out how to spin this, how to charm his way out of it. But there was no way out. Not this time. Your Honor, I think there's been a misunderstanding, he finally said, his voice taking on that smooth, reasonable tone he always used when he was lying. Maybe my lawyer got the dates mixed up when he was preparing the paperwork. It's an honest mistake. Mr. Hayes. Judge Winters's voice could have cut glass. Are you claiming your lawyer committed fraud? No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying. Because that's what you're describing. Either you knowingly submitted a fraudulent document to this court, or your lawyer did it without your knowledge. Those are the only 2 options here. Paulson stood up, his face red. Your Honor, I had no knowledge of any impropriety. My client provided me with this document and assured me it was legitimate. Trevor's head whipped around to stare at his lawyer. What? No, you were the one who... Mr. Hayes, Paulson said coldly, I strongly suggest you stop talking. But Trevor couldn't stop. That was his fatal flaw. He always thought he could talk his way out of everything. Your Honor, this is all just a big misunderstanding. The dates might be off, but the spirit of the agreement is what matters. Melissa and I had an understanding about how we'd handle her money, and this document just formalizes the spirit of the agreement. Judge Winters set the papers down on her bench with a sharp crack that made everyone in the courtroom jump. Mr. Hayes, you submitted a legal document to this court as evidence. That document claims to have been executed on a specific date. But it contains information that proves it couldn't possibly have been signed on that date. Do you understand that attempting to defraud the court is a serious matter? Trevor's charm was completely gone now. His face was red, his hands were shaking, and he looked like he wanted to bolt from the room. Your Honor, I didn't mean to, it wasn't supposed to be. And that's when I knew. Right then, in that moment, I knew we'd won. But I wanted more than just victory. I wanted him to understand exactly what he'd done to my daughter. I wanted him to feel the weight of his own greed crushing him. So I stood up. "Your Honor," I said, my voice clear and steady. "May I approach the bench?" Every head in the courtroom swiveled toward me. Melissa grabbed my arm. "Mom, what are you doing?" I patted her hand. "Trust me, sweetheart." Judge Winters looked at me over her reading glasses. "And you are?" "Patricia Brennan, Your Honor. I'm Miss Brennan's mother." "Miss Brennan, this is highly irregular." "I understand, Your Honor. But I have something you need to see." I reached into my bag and pulled out the manila envelope. The one I'd been carrying since I left the house that morning. The one that contained the final piece of the puzzle. The piece that would destroy Trevor completely. Dorothy was staring at me with wide eyes. She mouthed, "What are you doing?" I walked up to the bench, my sensible heels clicking on the floor, and handed the envelope to Judge Winters. "What's this?" she asked. "Evidence, Your Honor. Evidence that Mr. Hayes knew about my daughter's inheritance before he married her. Evidence that this entire marriage was a con from the very beginning." Trevor shot to his feet. "That's not true. Your Honor, she can't just." "Mr. Hayes, sit down," Judge Winters snapped. Then she opened the envelope. "If you're still with me, still listening to this story unfold, I want you to do something for me. Subscribe to this channel. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And check the description box below for more stories like this, stories about people who refuse to be victims. Because what happened next? It was worth every sleepless night, every hour of investigation, every moment of doubt. Judge Winters pulled out the papers I'd put in that envelope. She read the first page. Then the second. Then she looked up at Trevor, and I swear to God, I saw something close to contempt flash across her face. "Miss Klein," she said slowly, "did you know about this?" Dorothy approached the bench, looking as confused as everyone else. She read over the judge's shoulder, and I watched her expression change from confusion to shock to something that looked like pure, predatory joy. "Your Honor," Dorothy said, her voice vibrating with suppressed excitement. "I had no idea. But if this is authentic—" "Oh, it's authentic," I said. "I verified it myself." "Someone want to tell the rest of us what's going on?" Paulson demanded. Judge Winters looked at him, then at Trevor, and I swear she almost smiled. "Ms. Brennan, the mother, not the plaintiff, has provided this court with a series of text messages. Text messages between your client and an unknown number, dated March through June of 2020. The time period when Mr. Hayes was dating Ms. Brennan." She picked up one of the pages and began to read aloud. "She's perfect. Successful, loaded with family money, and desperate for attention. I give it 6 months before she's completely hooked." The courtroom was so quiet you could have heard a pin drop. Judge Winters continued. "The grandma's sick. She's leaving everything to Melissa. Once we're married and the old lady kicks it, I'll finally be set for life. No more working for anyone. No more pretending to be something I'm not." Trevor's face had gone from red to white. He looked like he might throw up. "Your Honor," Paulson said weakly, "we'd need to authenticate those messages." "Oh, we will," Judge Winters said. "Believe me, we will. But assuming they're real, and they look pretty damning to me, we're talking about a pattern of fraud that goes far beyond a backdated postnup. We're talking about a man who deliberately targeted a woman because of her financial situation, married her under false pretenses, and then attempted to steal her inheritance through fraudulent legal documents." She looked directly at Trevor. "Mr. Hayes, I'm going to ask you one time, did you send these messages?" Trevor opened his mouth. Nothing came out. He looked at his lawyer. He looked at Melissa. He looked at me, and I looked right back at him with every ounce of hatred I'd been carrying for months. He started. "I can explain." I didn't ask for an explanation. I asked a yes or no question. "Did you send these messages?" Silence stretched out like a rubber band about to snap. I could hear someone coughing in the back of the courtroom. I could hear the heating system humming. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Finally, Trevor's shoulders sagged. "Yes," he whispered. "I'm sorry, Mr. Hayes, I didn't catch that." "Yes." He practically shouted it. "Yes, I sent them. But I didn't mean any of it. I was venting to a friend. I was blowing off steam. I loved Melissa. I did. I still do." Melissa made a sound beside me. Something between a laugh and a sob. I reached over and took her hand again. Judge Winters set the papers down carefully. Mr. Hayes, you just admitted under oath that you pursued your wife specifically because of her family's money. You've admitted that you married her with the intention of gaining access to her inheritance. And we have documentary evidence that you attempted to defraud this court with a backdated postnuptial agreement. Do you understand the severity of what you've done? Your Honor, please. I'm not finished. Her voice was ice. Mr. Paulson, your client's petition for spousal support is denied. His petition for division of marital assets is denied. Furthermore, I'm ordering Mr. Hayes to return any and all funds taken from joint accounts within the last 2 years, with interest. The inheritance Ms. Brennan received is and will remain her separate property, and Mr. Hayes has no claim to it whatsoever. Your Honor, Dorothy said, standing up again. My client would also like to request that Mr. Hayes be held responsible for her legal fees in this matter, given that his fraudulent actions necessitated these proceedings. Judge Winters nodded. Granted. Mr. Hayes, you'll be responsible for both parties' legal fees. And Mr. Paulson? I'm strongly considering referring this matter to the Bar Association for review of your role in submitting that fraudulent postnup. You might want to get your own lawyer. Paulson went pale. Your Honor, I had no knowledge. Save it for the Ethics Committee. Now, unless there's anything else, I'm granting Ms. Brennan's petition for divorce. This marriage is dissolved, effective immediately. And Mr. Hayes? If I were you, I'd be very concerned about potential criminal charges. Fraud, identity theft, theft by deception. I'm sure the prosecutor's office will be very interested in this case. She banged her gavel, and it was over. Just like that. 4 years of Trevor's manipulation, gone in a single moment. I looked over at Trevor. He was standing there like someone had hit him with a 2x4, his face completely drained of color, his hands trembling. Paulson had already grabbed his briefcase and was heading for the door, clearly wanting nothing more to do with this disaster. And then Trevor looked at me. Really looked at me. And for the first time since I'd met him, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. You, he said, his voice shaking. You did this. Yes, I said simply. I did. Those texts, how did you? Where did you even get those? I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. You'd be amazed what you can find when you know where to look. And when you have enough motivation. His face twisted with rage. You had no right. No right. I stepped closer to him, and I felt Melissa's hand on my arm, trying to hold me back, but I shook her off. You married my daughter for her money. You cheated on her. You tried to steal from her. And you want to talk to me about rights. You ruined my life. No, Trevor. You ruined your own life. I just made sure everyone else could see what you really are. For a moment, I thought he might actually try to hit me. His hands clenched into fists, and I saw a vein throbbing in his temple. But then Dorothy stepped between us, and the bailiff moved closer, and Trevor seemed to remember where he was. He turned and walked out of the courtroom, his footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. And then Melissa was in my arms, sobbing, and I was crying too, and Dorothy was saying something about paperwork and finalization and next steps, but I couldn't hear any of it over the sound of relief rushing through my body like a breaking dam. We'd won. We'd actually won. I suppose you're wondering how I got those text messages. How a 63-year-old retired schoolteacher managed to track down digital evidence that a man like Trevor thought he'd hidden safely away. Well, let me tell you. Because this is the part of the story where I stopped being just a mother and became something else entirely. Something I'd never thought I could be. It started about a week after I'd found the discrepancy in the postnuptial agreement. I was lying awake at 3 in the morning. Insomnia had become my constant companion since Melissa's world fell apart, and I was thinking about Trevor's patterns. The way he operated. The way he always had a plan, always had an angle. Men like Trevor don't just wake up one day and decide to con someone. It's who they are. It's what they do. And if he'd done it to Melissa, chances were good he'd done it before. So I started researching his past relationships. Trevor's social media had been scrubbed clean. He deleted or hidden anything older than 2 years, which was suspicious in itself. But the internet never really forgets, does it? I found old tagged photos, comments on other people's posts, archived versions of deleted pages. And slowly, a picture began to emerge. Before Melissa, There had been a woman named Jennifer Kowalski. Before Jennifer, there'd been Amanda Chen. Wait, no, I can't use that name. Let me call her Amanda Wong. Before Amanda, there'd been someone named Brittany Summers. I found Jennifer on Facebook. She was living in Cincinnati now, married with 2 kids, working as a nurse. I sent her a message. Hi Jennifer, I know this is going to sound strange, but I'm trying to gather information about Trevor Hayes. My daughter was married to him, and they're going through a difficult divorce. Would you be willing to talk to me about your experience with him? I didn't expect her to respond. Why would she want to dredge up old history with some stranger? But she messaged me back within an hour. Oh my God. Your poor daughter. Yes, I'll talk to you. Call me. We spoke for 2 hours that night. Jennifer told me she'd dated Trevor for 18 months back in 2016. She'd been a medical resident at the time, working 100-hour weeks, completely exhausted and vulnerable. Trevor had seemed like a dream, attentive, romantic, supportive. 6 months into the relationship, her grandfather died and left her $30,000. Within 3 months of receiving that inheritance, Jennifer discovered Trevor had been using her credit cards without permission. He'd racked up $20,000 in charges, vacations, electronics, even a down payment on a motorcycle. When she confronted him, he'd become verbally abusive. When she broke up with him, he'd emptied their joint checking account and disappeared. I tried to take him to court, Jennifer told me, her voice tight with old anger. But he declared bankruptcy and I never saw a penny. It took me years to pay off those credit cards. I almost lost my medical license because of the debt. Did he ever text anyone about his plans? I asked. Did you ever see any evidence that he was deliberately targeting you? Oh, absolutely. After we broke up, one of his friends felt guilty and sent me screenshots. Trevor had been texting him the whole time we were together, bragging about how he was playing the long game with a rich doctor chick. But by the time I got those screenshots, Trevor was long gone, and my lawyer said there wasn't much we could do with them. My heart started racing. Jennifer, do you still have those screenshots? Maybe. They'd be in my old email account. Why? Because my daughter's divorce hearing is in a few weeks, and I need to prove that Trevor has a pattern of targeting women for their money. Those texts could be crucial evidence. Hold on. Let me look. I waited, my fingernails digging into my palm, while she searched through years of old emails. The minutes stretched out. And then. Found them. Oh God, they're even worse than I remembered. Listen to this. Jennifer's grandfather is dying. When he goes, she's getting at least $50K. If I play my cards right, I'll be set up for the next year. My hands were shaking. Jennifer, can you send those to me? Already doing it. And Mrs. Brennan? Please destroy him. Do it for every woman he's ever hurt. I tracked down Amanda Wong next. She was harder to find. She'd moved to Portland and changed her last name after marrying. But I eventually located her through LinkedIn and sent a careful, professional message. She called me within a day. Amanda's story was even worse than Jennifer's. She'd dated Trevor in 2014, right after her mother died, and left her a small life insurance policy, $45,000. Trevor had convinced her to invest it in a business opportunity run by one of his friends. The business was fake. The money was gone. Trevor had gotten a cut and vanished. He destroyed me financially, Amanda said, her voice hollow. I was 26 years old, and I had to declare bankruptcy. It took me a decade to rebuild my credit. A decade. And you know what the worst part is? I loved him. I really, truly loved him, and the whole time he was just using me. Did he ever text about it? Did he ever discuss his plans with anyone? Actually, yes. My roommate at the time overheard him on the phone once, laughing about how easy it was to get me to trust him. She recorded part of the conversation on her phone. I never did anything with it because I just wanted to move on with my life, but if it would help your daughter. Amanda, it would help more than you know. By the end of that week, I had evidence of Trevor's pattern going back nearly 10 years. But I still didn't have anything directly connecting him to his pursuit of Melissa. I had proof he was a con artist, but not proof that he'd specifically targeted my daughter for her grandmother's inheritance. That's when I decided to do something that probably crossed a legal line. Something that could have gotten me in serious trouble. I decided to access Trevor's phone. Now, before you judge me, and believe me, I judged myself plenty, let me explain how I justified it. Trevor had been careless in one crucial way. He'd given Melissa his old phone when he upgraded to a new model about 6 months before their separation. That old phone was sitting in a drawer in Melissa's house, forgotten. I asked to borrow it. Told Melissa I wanted to see if I could use it for something. I don't even remember what excuse I gave. She handed it over without thinking twice about it. That phone hadn't been wiped. Trevor had just done a factory reset, which any tech-savvy person will tell you doesn't actually delete everything. The data is still there. It's just marked as available to be overwritten. I took the phone to a tech repair shop in a strip mall on the east side of Columbus. The kid behind the counter couldn't have been more than 19, with purple hair and multiple piercings, and he looked at me like I was his grandmother asking about the Google. I need to recover deleted data from this phone, I told him. Text messages, specifically. Can you do that? He looked skeptical. Depends on how long ago they were deleted and if they've been overwritten. Also, is this legal? Because I can't help you do anything illegal. It's my son-in-law's old phone, I lied smoothly. He's been cheating on my daughter, and I'm trying to help her divorce case. She has legal ownership of the device. The kid's expression changed. Oh, man. That's rough. Yeah, I can try. It'll cost you though. Data recovery isn't cheap. I don't care what it costs. It took him 3 days. 3 days of me jumping every time my phone rang, convinced somehow that Trevor would find out what I was doing. 3 days of wondering if I'd completely lost my mind, if I'd become the kind of person who broke laws and violated privacy in the name of revenge. But when that kid called me back to the shop and handed me a thumb drive with a triumphant grin on his face, all my doubts evaporated. Got about 60% recovery on the deleted texts, he said. Some of them are corrupted or incomplete, but there's a lot there, including some juicy conversations from 2020. I took that thumb drive home, sat down at my computer with shaking hands, and started reading. And oh, what I found. The texts I'd read aloud in court were just the tip of the iceberg. Trevor had been texting with someone he'd saved in his contacts as Ray but who was clearly a close friend, possibly a partner in crime. The conversation went back months before Trevor had even met Melissa. Trevor, need to find a new mark. Tapped out my last credit card and the collectors are calling. Ray, what about that teacher chick you were seeing? Trevor, nah, she's broke. Teachers don't make shit. Need someone with family money or a good salary. Then, a week later, Trevor, met someone interesting at the networking event. Executive type, mid-30s, single. Definitely has money. And get this, she mentioned her grandmother is sick. Old money, probably got a decent inheritance coming. Ray, you're a sick bastard, you know that. Trevor, says the guy who's asking me for loan money every other week. If this works out, we're both set. Reading those messages, I felt physically ill. But I kept going. Because I needed to see all of it. I needed to understand the full scope of what he'd done. Trevor, took Melissa to dinner at that expensive place on High Street. She paid, obviously. Said she didn't mind. God, this is going to be easy. Trevor, convinced her to introduce me to her mom. Old lady seems suspicious but Melissa's too far gone to notice. Should have the ring on her finger by summer. Trevor, got her. She said yes. Now I just need to keep her happy until the grandma dies and the money comes through. Ray, I'm telling you, this is the big one. This is retirement money. I sat at my computer and cried. Not just for Melissa, though God knows my heart broke for her all over again. But for every woman Trevor had hurt. For Jennifer and Amanda and probably dozens of others whose names I'd never know. And then I stopped crying, printed out every single text message, and put them in that manila envelope. Because Trevor Hayes needed to face consequences. Real consequences. The kind that would follow him for the rest of his life. I want to pause here and say something to anyone watching this who's ever been manipulated, conned, or used by someone they trusted. It's not your fault. People like Trevor are professionals. They're skilled at finding vulnerabilities and exploiting them. They're good at making themselves seem like exactly what you need. And when it falls apart, when you finally see what they really are, it's devastating. But you're stronger than they are. You're stronger than you think you are. And sometimes, strength looks like a 63-year-old woman spending 3 weeks tracking down evidence and refusing to let a con artist get away with it. If this story is resonating with you, if you're invested in seeing justice done, help me spread this message. Subscribe. Comment with where you're watching from. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And check the description box below for more stories about people who fought back and won. The morning after I got those recovered texts, I called Dorothy and told her what I'd done. I expected her to be angry, maybe even tell me she couldn't use illegally obtained evidence. Instead, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Patricia, technically what you did exists in a legal gray area. The phone belonged to your daughter, so you had permission to access it. The data recovery could be argued as legitimate. But I need to be very careful about how I present this." "I understand. Will it hold up in court?" "If the judge allows it into evidence, yes. It corroborates everything else we've found. It establishes a clear pattern of behavior. And most importantly, it proves intent. Trevor went into this marriage with the specific goal of stealing Melissa's inheritance. So we can use it. We can try. But Patricia, don't tell Melissa how you got this. Not yet. If the judge asks directly, we'll have to be honest. But until then, let's just say you received these messages from a source." So that's what we did. I created a new email address, sent the texts to Dorothy from that address, and we built them into our case strategy. Dorothy filed them as evidence received from an anonymous source who had access to Trevor's communications. It was deceptive. It was probably unethical. But it was also the truth. Those texts were real. Trevor had written them. And he deserved to be held accountable for them. The night before the court hearing, Melissa and I sat together in my kitchen. She was picking at the casserole I'd made, not really eating, just pushing the food around her plate. "Mom," she said suddenly, "how did you really get those text messages?" I looked at her. My beautiful, brilliant daughter, who'd been beaten down by a man who'd never deserved her. Who'd spent months blaming herself for not seeing the truth sooner. "Does it matter?" I asked. She thought about it. Then she shook her head. "No. I guess it doesn't. I can't believe he was planning this from the beginning. Before he even really knew me. I was just a mark to him." "You were never just anything," I said fiercely. "You are extraordinary. You are successful and kind and brilliant. And Trevor saw all of that and decided to exploit it because he's a parasite who can't create anything of his own. That's on him, not you." She started crying again. I held her hand across the table. "We're going to end him tomorrow," I promised. "I'm going to make sure he never does this to anyone else." And I meant it. Every word. Now we come to the moment I've been building toward. The moment that changed everything. The moment where years of Trevor's lies came crashing down around him like a house of cards in a windstorm. Remember, we'd just left off with Judge Winters reading those text messages aloud, Trevor admitting he'd sent them, and the judge denying all of his petitions. But that wasn't the end of it. Not by a long shot. Because Trevor Hayes, for all his skills as a con artist, had one fatal flaw: he couldn't stand to lose. And he especially couldn't stand to be humiliated in public. After Judge Winters dissolved the marriage and ordered him to repay the money he'd taken, after she'd threatened him with criminal charges and ethics investigations, Trevor should have cut his losses and left quietly. Any sensible person would have. But Trevor wasn't sensible. He was desperate and cornered and furious. And desperate, cornered people do stupid things. "Your Honor," he said, his voice rising. "This is unfair. This is completely unfair. I loved Melissa. I gave her everything. And now because of some text messages I sent when I was drunk and angry, I'm losing everything." Judge Winters looked at him over her reading glasses. "Mr. Hayes, I strongly suggest you stop talking." But he didn't stop. He couldn't. Those texts were taken out of context. I was venting to a friend. Everyone says things they don't mean when they're frustrated. That doesn't prove anything except that I'm human. Mr. Hayes. And that postnup, yeah, maybe the date got messed up, but the intent was clear. Melissa and I agreed to share everything. We were a team. We were partners. And now her mother, he turned to point at me, his face twisted with rage. Her mother has poisoned her against me. She's been trying to break us up since day one. I stood up. I couldn't help it. That's because I saw exactly what you were from the moment I met you. Mom, don't, Melissa whispered, pulling on my arm. But I was done being quiet. You're a con artist and a thief, Trevor. You married my daughter for her money, and when that didn't work fast enough, you tried to steal it through fraud. You're not a victim here. You're a predator. Trevor's face went red. I'm a predator? I'm a predator? Lady, you broke into my phone. You stole my private messages. You had no right. I had every right. I shot back. You hurt my daughter. You used her and lied to her and tried to destroy her financially. Do you have any idea what you've put her through? Do you even care? Of course I care. I love her. You don't love anyone but yourself. Enough. Judge Winters's voice cracked through the courtroom like a whip. Both of you, sit down. Now. Saturday. Trevor stayed standing. Mr. Hayes, the judge said, her voice dangerously quiet. You have two choices. You can sit down, accept this ruling, and walk out of here with some dignity intact. Or you can continue this tantrum and I will hold you in contempt of court. Which would you prefer? For a moment, I thought Trevor was going to choose the contempt. I could see him calculating, trying to figure out if there was any way to turn this around, any angle he hadn't played yet. And then he played his last card. Fine, he said. Fine. I'll accept your ruling, Your Honor. But I want it on the record that Melissa promised me half of everything. She promised me that when we got married, we'd be equal partners. And I trusted her. I gave up job opportunities for her. I supported her career. And this is how she repays me. By sicking her mom on me like some kind of attack dog. He turned to look directly at Melissa. I hope you're happy, Mel. I hope it was worth it. Because you're going to spend the rest of your life alone, and you'll remember that you threw away someone who actually loved you because your mom convinced you I was the bad guy. Melissa's face crumpled. She looked down at the table, her shoulders shaking. And that's when something inside me snapped. I stood up again, and this time when Melissa grabbed my arm, I gently removed her hand and walked straight up to where Trevor was standing. You want to know what job opportunities you gave up? I said, my voice low and hard. None. You've been unemployed or underemployed for the past 3 years, living off my daughter's income while you pretended to have a career. You want to know what support you gave her? None. She worked 60-hour weeks while you played golf and went to bars and spent her money on your girlfriend. That's not. And you want to talk about love? I stepped closer to him, close enough to see the fear flickering behind his anger. Love doesn't plot and scheme to steal someone's inheritance. Love doesn't cheat. Love doesn't lie. You don't know the first thing about love, Trevor. You're empty inside. You're a shell of a man who can only feel anything when you're taking something from someone else. You don't know anything about me, he hissed. I know everything about you. I know about Jennifer Kowalski. I know about Amanda Wong. I know about at least 3 other women you've conned before my daughter. I know you've been doing this for over a decade, targeting vulnerable women and bleeding them dry. And I know that after today, everyone else is going to know it too. His face went white. You can't, you have no proof. I have all the proof I need. And so does the prosecutor's office in 3 different counties. I smiled at him. I sent them everything this morning. That was a lie. I hadn't sent anything to any prosecutors yet. But I was going to, and I wanted to see his face when he realized his past was about to catch up with him. Trevor staggered back like I'd physically struck him. You. Ms. Brennan. Judge Winters's voice was still sharp, but I thought I detected a hint of approval underneath it. Return to your seat, please. I walked back to the table and sat down next to Melissa. She was staring at me with wide eyes, like she'd never seen me before. Mom, she whispered. Did you really? Every word, I murmured back. Trevor was still standing there, swaying slightly, looking like he might pass out. His lawyer, or rather, his former lawyer, since Paulson was already packing up his briefcase, grabbed his arm and tried to steer him toward the exit. But Trevor shook him off. And then, in what I can only describe as a complete mental breakdown, he turned to face the small crowd gathered in the courtroom. other people waiting for their cases to be called, a few court staff, a couple of law students observing proceedings, and he laughed. It was a horrible sound. High-pitched and unhinged, like something had broken in his brain. "You want to know the really funny part?" he said, addressing the room at large. "The really hilarious part? I almost pulled it off. I was this close." He held up his thumb and forefinger, nearly touching. "This close to living off Melissa's fortune for the rest of my life. Do you know how rare it is to find a woman that loaded and that naive? That trusting? I could have milked that for decades. Decades." The courtroom was dead silent. Everyone was staring at him in horrified fascination. "But no," Trevor continued, his voice rising. "No, Mommy dearest over there had to stick her nose in where it didn't belong. Had to play detective. Had to ruin everything." He turned to look at Judge Winters, and he was still laughing. "So yeah, Your Honor, you're right. I married her for the money. Is that what you want to hear? I saw a lonely, desperate woman with a trust fund and a dying grandmother, and I thought, jackpot." Melissa made a small, wounded sound beside me. I grabbed her hand and held it tight. "And you know what?" Trevor spread his arms wide, like he was on stage. "I'd do it again. Because women like Melissa, they're everywhere. Successful, smart, accomplished women who can run companies but can't see when they're being played. And there's always going to be guys like me ready to take advantage of that." Judge Winters stood up. "Mr. Hayes, you are now in contempt of court. Bailiff, take him into custody." But Trevor was on a roll now, completely unhinged, all his carefully constructed charm stripped away to reveal the ugly, parasitic thing underneath. "You think you've won?" he shouted at me as the bailiff approached. "You think this is over? I'll appeal. I'll fight this. I'll make your daughter's life hell. I'll—" "Mr. Hayes." Judge Winters's voice thundered through the courtroom. "You are making threats in front of a judge and multiple witnesses. I strongly suggest you stop talking immediately." The bailiff grabbed Trevor's arm. Trevor tried to pull away, and for a moment, I thought he might actually try to fight. But then whatever was left of his common sense kicked in, and he let himself be led away, still muttering under his breath about unfair judges and vindictive mothers and women who didn't know how good they had it. The door closed behind him with a heavy thud. For several seconds, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The silence was so profound I could hear my own blood rushing in my ears. Then Judge Winters sat back down, removed her reading glasses, and rubbed her eyes. "Well," she said tiredly, "that was certainly educational. Miss Klein, prepare an order incorporating everything we've discussed today. Mr. Hayes's contempt hearing will be scheduled for next week, though given what just happened, I imagine he'll be dealing with more than just contempt charges." She looked at Melissa. "Miss Brennan, I am truly sorry for what you've been through. Your divorce is granted, and I'm putting additional protective orders in place. Mr. Hayes is not to contact you in any way. If he violates that order, call the police immediately." Melissa nodded, tears streaming down her face. Then Judge Winters looked at me, and I swear, she almost smiled. "Miss Brennan, the elder Miss Brennan, you might have bent a few rules today. But you did right by your daughter. Sometimes that's what matters most." I felt my throat tighten with emotion. "Thank you, Your Honor." She banged her gavel one final time. "We're adjourned." As people started filing out of the courtroom, Melissa turned to me and burst into tears. Not sad tears this time, relief, and release, and something that looked almost like joy. "It's over," she sobbed. "Mom, it's finally over." I held her and let her cry, and I cried too, and Dorothy stood beside us with tissues and a smile on her face that said she'd been practicing law for 30 years and had never seen anything quite like what just happened. As we were leaving the courthouse, stepping out into the cold January air, Melissa stopped and looked at me. "Mom? Those messages you read in court, the ones from the phone recovery, you said you got them from a source. Was that you?" I looked at my daughter, my brave, brilliant, beautiful daughter who'd been through hell and come out the other side. "Does it matter?" I asked. She thought about it for a moment. Then she hugged me. "No," she said. "It doesn't matter. All that matters is that you saved me. You saved yourself, sweetheart. I just gave you the tools." We walked to the parking garage together, and for the first time in months, I felt like maybe everything was going to be okay. Maybe we were going to be okay. But the story doesn't end there. Because Trevor Hayes, for all his faults, was right about one thing: it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The week after the hearing was strange. Surreal, even. Like we'd been living in a nightmare for so long that waking up didn't feel quite real. Melissa moved back into her house. Trevor had been staying there while they were separated, but the judge's order required him to vacate immediately. When we went to the house together to make sure he was gone, we found evidence of his continued contempt scattered throughout. The master bedroom was trashed. He'd punched holes in the walls, shattered the mirror on Melissa's dresser, and torn up photos of her family, including several of Gerald, my late husband, who'd never done anything to Trevor except fail to be alive when his granddaughter needed protection. In the kitchen, every dish was broken. Every single one. Plates, bowls, glasses, even the good china that had belonged to Melissa's grandmother. The same grandmother whose inheritance Trevor had tried to steal. The living room furniture had been slashed with something sharp, the cushions gutted, stuffing everywhere like it had snowed inside the house. It was vindictive and cruel and childish, and it told me everything I needed to know about what Trevor was really like when he didn't get his way. Melissa stood in the middle of the wreckage and just stared. She didn't cry, didn't scream. She just looked around at the destruction of her home, her belongings, her life, and said quietly, "He really hates me." "No," I said, picking up a broken picture frame that had held a photo of Melissa at her college graduation. "He hates that he lost. He hates that he got caught. This isn't about you, sweetheart. This is about his ego. He destroyed everything. Things can be replaced. You're safe, and you're free, and that's what matters." She nodded, but I could see it in her eyes. The violation of having someone you trusted, someone you loved, deliberately destroy the things you valued most. It was another level of betrayal, another wound on top of all the others. We called the police and filed a report for destruction of property. The officer who responded was a young woman named Officer Simmons, and when she saw the extent of the damage, her expression hardened. "This is more than just property damage," she said, taking photos of everything. "This is targeted, malicious destruction. Given the divorce proceedings and the judge's protective order, this constitutes harassment at minimum, possibly stalking. Has he tried to contact you since the hearing?" Melissa shook her head. "No. But I've been too scared to check all my messages." Officer Simmons handed her a card. "Check everything: email, social media, phone. If he's contacted you at all, it's a violation of the protective order. We can arrest him." That night, back at my house where Melissa was staying temporarily, we went through her messages together. And we found them. 17 text messages from Trevor, sent over the past 3 days. They started out almost apologetic. "Mel, I'm sorry about how things went in court. I didn't mean to lose my temper. Can we talk? Please just give me 5 minutes. I need to explain some things. But they quickly devolved. You're making a huge mistake. Your mom has poisoned you against me. I hope you realize what you've done. I gave you the best years of my life. You're going to regret this. You're going to be alone forever, and you'll remember that you threw away the only man who ever really loved you. And then they got darker. I know where you're staying. I know you're at your mom's house. I drove by tonight. You can't hide from me forever. This isn't over, Melissa. Not by a long shot. My blood ran cold reading them. Melissa was shaking beside me. "He's been watching your house," she whispered. "Mom, what if he—" "He's not going to do anything," I said firmly, though my own heart was hammering in my chest. "Because we're calling Officer Simmons right now, and Trevor is going to spend the night in jail." I dialed the number on the card. Officer Simmons answered on the second ring. Within an hour, there were 2 police cruisers parked outside my house. Within 2 hours, Trevor Hayes was arrested for violating a protective order, criminal menacing, and destruction of property. His bail was set at $50,000, money he didn't have, since Judge Winters had frozen his assets pending repayment of what he'd stolen from Melissa. He spent 3 days in county lockup before his brother posted bail. Those 3 days were the first time since this entire nightmare began that I actually slept through the night. But while Trevor was locked up, something else was happening. Something I hadn't anticipated. The story was getting out. It started with a court reporter for the Columbus Dispatch who'd been in the courthouse that day. She'd witnessed Trevor's breakdown, heard him confess to marrying Melissa for money, watched him get dragged away by the bailiff. And apparently, she'd thought it was newsworthy. The article ran on page 3 of the Metro section, "Local man arrested after admitting marriage fraud in court outburst." It was a short piece, maybe 400 words, but it had all the key details. Trevor's name, his admission, the protective order, the arrest. And suddenly, my phone started ringing. The first call came from Jennifer Kowalski, the nurse in Cincinnati I'd interviewed weeks earlier. "Patricia, I just saw the article. Is this the same Trevor Hayes who was arrested?" "Yes," I said. "That's him." Oh my God, he finally got caught. "Patricia, I need to tell you something. After we talked, I went to the police in Cincinnati. I filed a report about what he did to me. They said it was too old to prosecute, but they put it in the system. And now that he's been arrested, they might be able to use it as part of a pattern." "Jennifer, that's wonderful. And I know 3 other women. 3 other women who dated Trevor and had similar things happen. We've been talking, comparing notes. Patricia, would it help if we all came forward?" I felt something fierce and triumphant unfurl in my chest. "Yes," I said. "Yes, it would help tremendously." By the end of the week, 7 women had contacted either me, Dorothy, or the Columbus Police Department with stories about Trevor Hayes. 7 women spanning 12 years, all with eerily similar experiences. He'd targeted them when they were vulnerable, after a death in the family, during a divorce, after a job loss. He'd swept them off their feet with romance and attention. And then, once he'd gotten access to their money, he'd either bled them dry slowly or made off with as much as he could carry. The amounts ranged from a few $1,000s to nearly $100,000. But it wasn't really about the money, not entirely. It was about the betrayal. The violation of trust. The way he'd made these women feel like they were crazy for suspecting him, like they were the problem. And now, finally, they were being heard. The local news picked up the story next. A reporter named Christine Valdez called me and asked if she could interview Melissa and me for a segment on relationship fraud. I was hesitant. The last thing Melissa needed was more public scrutiny. But when I asked her about it, she surprised me. "I want to do it," she said. "I want other women to see this and recognize the signs. I want them to know they're not alone." So we did the interview. We sat in my living room with the cameras rolling, and Melissa told her story. She talked about how charming Trevor had been, how he'd seemed like the perfect partner. She talked about the isolation, the gaslighting, the moment she'd found out about the affair. And she talked about the inheritance. About how Trevor had pressured her to put it in a joint account, how he tried to get her to sign that fraudulent postnup, how he'd been planning from day one to take everything she'd worked for. "I'm a successful businesswoman," she said, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. "I have an MBA. I run a department at a Fortune 500 company. And I still fell for it. Because people like Trevor, they're professionals. They know exactly what to say, exactly how to act. And if it can happen to me, it can happen to anyone." The segment aired on the 6 o'clock news the following Monday. By Tuesday morning, it had been picked up by news outlets across Ohio. By Wednesday, it was trending on social media. And by Thursday, the Columbus prosecutor's office announced they were filing criminal charges against Trevor Hayes for theft by deception, fraud, and identity theft. I'll never forget the moment Dorothy called to tell me. I was in my kitchen making coffee, my sanctuary, the place where I'd done so much of my planning and investigating, and when my phone rang and I saw her name, my hand shook so badly I almost dropped the mug. "They're prosecuting," I said, not quite believing it. "Full prosecution. Multiple charges. Patricia, with the evidence we have, with all these women coming forward, with his confession on the record, he's looking at serious prison time. 10 years, possibly more." I had to sit down. My legs just gave out, and I found myself on the floor of my kitchen, my back against the cabinets, tears streaming down my face. "Patricia? Are you there?" "I'm here," I managed. "I'm just... Dorothy, is this real? Is this actually happening?" "It's real. You did this. You and Melissa and every brave woman who came forward. You're the reason Trevor Hayes is finally going to face consequences for what he's done." After I hung up with Dorothy, I sat on my kitchen floor for a long time. I thought about Gerald, about how he'd always said I was the strongest person he knew. I thought about all those nights I'd spent awake, researching and planning and refusing to give up. I thought about Melissa, and how close we'd come to losing everything to a man who saw her as nothing more than a paycheck. And I thought about all those other women, Jennifer, Amanda, and the 5 others whose names I'd learned. Women who'd been hurt and used and thrown away like they didn't matter. We'd stopped him. We'd actually stopped him. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for late February. In the meantime, Trevor was released on bail with strict conditions. He had to wear an ankle monitor, he couldn't leave Franklin County, and he was forbidden from contacting any of the women who'd filed complaints against him. I'd like to say he followed those conditions. I'd like to say he learned his lesson and went quietly. But Trevor Hayes was never good at following rules. 2 weeks before the preliminary hearing, I got a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. It was 11 o'clock at night, late enough that I almost didn't answer. But something made me pick up. Hello. Heavy breathing on the other end. Then, you ruined my life. My blood turned to ice. Trevor. You destroyed everything. My reputation, my freedom, my future. All because you couldn't mind your own business. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding. How did you get this number? That doesn't matter. What matters is that you're going to fix this. Fix it. Trevor, you broke the law. Multiple laws. You hurt my daughter. Your daughter was happy until you poisoned her against me. His voice was rising, losing control. We were fine. We were good together. And you couldn't stand that, could you? You couldn't stand that she'd chosen someone over you. That's not what happened and you know it. You're going to call the prosecutor tomorrow, he continued, talking over me. You're going to tell them you made it all up. The texts, the phone records, all of it. You're going to say you fabricated evidence because you didn't approve of me. I almost laughed. Trevor, I'm not going to do that. Yes, you are. Because if you don't, I'm going to make you regret it. Is that a threat? It's a promise. You think you've won? You think this is over? I still have friends, Patricia. I still have connections. And I'm going to make sure everyone knows what kind of person you really are. The kind of person who breaks into phones and manufactures evidence and destroys lives because of some vendetta. I hung up on him. Then I immediately called Officer Simmons and played her the recording, because yes, I'd been smart enough to record the call. Ohio is a one-party consent state, which means I only needed my own permission to record a conversation I was part of. Trevor was arrested again the next morning for violating his bail conditions. This time, bail was revoked entirely. He'd spend the next 4 months in jail awaiting trial. And I'd spend those 4 months making sure every single piece of evidence, every witness testimony, every receipt and text message and bank record was organized and ready to present to a jury. Because Trevor Hayes had been right about one thing, this wasn't over. But he'd been wrong about who was going to regret it. If you're still with me, still following this journey, I need you to know something. This isn't just entertainment. This isn't just a story to pass the time. This is real life. This happened to my daughter. This is happening to women and men all over the country every single day. Financial abuse is real. Relationship fraud is real. And the people who commit these crimes are counting on their victims being too ashamed, too embarrassed, too scared to fight back. Don't be. Fight back. Document everything. Trust your instincts. And if someone in your life is showing you who they really are, believe them the first time. Subscribe if you want to see how this story ends. Comment with where you're from, and share your own experiences if you feel safe doing so. Check the description below for resources on financial abuse and relationship fraud, and for more stories like this one. Because the more we talk about this, the more we share these stories, the harder it becomes for predators like Trevor to operate in the shadows. June in Columbus is beautiful. The trees are in full bloom, the sun is warm without being oppressive, and there's a sense of possibility in the air. People are happier. Lighter. The long Ohio winter is finally, definitively over. It seemed almost unfair that Trevor Hayes' trial was scheduled for such a lovely time of year. Like the world should have been grey and stormy to match the darkness of what we were about to confront. But maybe that was the point. Maybe it was important that we face this ugliness in the light, in the warmth, in a season of growth and renewal. The trial was held in the Franklin County Court of Common Pleas. The prosecutor assigned to the case was a woman named Laura Chen. Wait, I can't use that name. Laura Mitchell. She was in her late 40s, with sharp eyes and a reputation for being absolutely merciless with white-collar criminals. I liked her immediately. Our first meeting was in her office downtown, a cramped space filled with filing cabinets and case files stacked on every available surface. Melissa and I sat across from her desk while she reviewed the mountain of evidence Dorothy and I had compiled. "This is good," Laura said, flipping through page after page of bank records. "This is really good. But I need you both to understand something." Trevor's defense attorney, Robert Sullivan, is one of the best criminal defense lawyers in the state. He's going to try to paint you both as vindictive women who are exaggerating or even fabricating evidence because of a messy divorce. "But we have proof," Melissa started. "I know. And the jury will see that proof." But Sullivan is going to try to muddy the waters. He's going to suggest that some of this spending was authorized, that the marriage was legitimately troubled on both sides, that Trevor's confession in court was made under duress. She looked directly at me. "And Patricia, he's going to come after you hard. He's going to paint you as an overbearing mother who couldn't accept her daughter's choice of partner." "Let him try," I said. Laura smiled grimly. "I'm glad you feel that way. Because you're going to be our star witness." The trial began on a Monday morning. The courthouse was packed, word had spread about the case, and apparently relationship fraud made for compelling courtroom drama. I saw people I recognized from the news coverage, several of the other women Trevor had victimized, and even a few true crime podcasters with their recording equipment, hoping to get material for their shows. Trevor was brought in wearing an orange jumpsuit and shackles. 4 months in jail had not been kind to him. He'd lost weight, his hair was longer and unkempt, and the charming smile was completely gone. He looked older, harder, diminished somehow. Good. The jury selection took 2 days. Laura was methodical, asking each potential juror about their views on marriage, divorce, financial abuse, and whether they could be impartial in a case involving relationship fraud. Sullivan tried to stack the jury with older men, probably hoping they'd be sympathetic to Trevor's claims of being emasculated by a successful woman. But Laura was strategic, and by the time the jury was seated, we had a balanced mix, 7 women and 5 men, ranging in age from their late 20s to their 60s. The trial itself began on Wednesday. Laura's opening statement was powerful. She walked the jury through Trevor's entire scheme, from the moment he'd identified Melissa as a target through his arrest for violating the protective order. She showed them the recovered text messages, explained the backdated postnup, and detailed each instance of theft and deception. "Trevor Hayes is a predator," she said, standing before the jury box. "Not the kind you see in movies, not violent or physically threatening. He's a financial predator. He identifies successful women at vulnerable moments in their lives, gains their trust, and then systematically steals from them. He's been doing this for over a decade. He's gotten away with it for over a decade. And he would still be doing it today if not for the courage of these women and the determination of one mother who refused to let him destroy her daughter." She pointed at me as she said it, and I felt every eye in the courtroom turn toward me. Sullivan's opening statement was exactly what Laura had predicted. He portrayed Trevor as a man who'd genuinely fallen in love, made some mistakes, and was now being unfairly prosecuted because of a bitter divorce and an overbearing mother-in-law. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sullivan said, pacing in front of the jury, "this is a case about a failed marriage. That's all. Trevor Hayes married Melissa Brennan because he loved her. Did their marriage have problems? Yes. Did Trevor make some poor financial decisions? Absolutely. But that doesn't make him a criminal. That makes him human." He talked about how successful men often face suspicion from their wives' families, how Trevor had been emasculated by having a wife who earned more than him, how the stress of the relationship had led to poor choices. It was masterful spin, I had to admit. If I hadn't known the truth, if I hadn't seen the evidence with my own eyes, I might have even felt a twinge of sympathy for Trevor. But I did know the truth. And over the next 2 weeks, Laura made sure the jury knew it too. The prosecution's case was methodical and devastating. Laura called witness after witness, each one adding another piece to the puzzle of who Trevor Hayes really was. Jennifer Kowalski testified about how Trevor had stolen from her in 2016, using her credit cards to fund a lifestyle she couldn't afford. She cried on the stand describing how she'd almost lost her medical license because of the debt he'd left her with. Amanda Wong testified about the fake business investment that had cost her $45,000 and a decade of financial recovery. 3 other women told similar stories, different details, but the same basic pattern. Meet a vulnerable woman. Gain her trust. Take her money. Disappear or gaslight her into thinking it was her fault. Then came the financial experts. A forensic accountant walked the jury through every transaction Trevor had made using Melissa's money. Hotel rooms with his girlfriend. Cash withdrawals that couldn't be explained. Credit card charges at jewelry stores for pieces Melissa had never received. Over the course of the marriage, the accountant testified, Mr. Hayes spent approximately $87,000 of Ms. Brennan's money on personal expenses that had nothing to do with household costs or shared marital expenses. The jury looked shocked, disgusted, angry. Then came the bank representatives who confirmed that the savings account referenced in the postnup hadn't existed at the supposed signing date. They brought records, signatures, timestamps, everything needed to prove conclusively that Trevor had tried to backdate a legal document. And then, on day 7 of the trial, Laura called me to the stand. I'd been dreading this moment and anticipating it in equal measure. I wore a navy blue dress, professional but not flashy, and carried myself with as much dignity as I could muster as I walked to the witness stand and placed my hand on the Bible. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. Laura approached me with a gentle smile. Ms. Brennan, can you tell the jury about your relationship with your daughter Melissa? I took a breath. Melissa is my only child. I raised her alone after my husband died when she was 14. She's brilliant, kind, successful, everything a mother could hope for. I'm very proud of her. And when Melissa started dating Trevor Hayes, what was your reaction? I was wary, I admitted. Trevor was charming, but something felt off. He never talked about his work in any detail. He always seemed to be between jobs or looking for the next opportunity. And the way he looked at Melissa sometimes, it wasn't love. It was calculation. Sullivan objected. Speculation, Your Honor. Overruled, Judge Chen said. The witness is describing her observations. Laura continued. What happened when Melissa's grandmother passed away and left her an inheritance? Trevor's behavior changed almost immediately. He became very focused on how Melissa was managing the money. He pressured her to put some of it in a joint account. He talked about investments and business opportunities that never seemed to materialize. And what did you do? I started investigating. I looked directly at the jury. I know how that sounds. Crazy mother-in-law, can't let go, doesn't trust her daughter's judgment. But I've been a teacher for almost 40 years. I've seen manipulative behavior. I've seen people who prey on others. And I saw all of those warning signs in Trevor Hayes. What did your investigation reveal? That Trevor had a pattern. I found at least 7 women he'd done this to before Melissa. Women he'd targeted specifically because they had money or were about to receive money. I found the text messages where he discussed his plans. I found the bank records showing how he'd stolen from my daughter. And I found the proof that he'd tried to create a fraudulent legal document to give himself access to money that wasn't his. Laura walked me through every piece of evidence. The recovered texts. The backdated postnup. The phone records showing Trevor had called and threatened me after being ordered not to contact anyone involved in the case. By the time she finished, I'd been on the stand for 3 hours. My throat was dry and my back ached, but I felt good. Strong. Like I'd said everything that needed to be said. Then Sullivan stood up for cross-examination, and I knew the real battle was about to begin. Ms. Brennan, he said, his tone dripping with false sympathy. You love your daughter very much, don't you? Of course. And you'd do anything to protect her? Yes. Even if that meant bending the truth. Or breaking the law. I kept my voice steady. I've never bent the truth. And the only law I may have bent was in service of exposing a criminal. Ah, yes. The phone you accessed, that was Trevor's phone, wasn't it? His personal property. It was an old phone he'd given to Melissa. She owned it. But the data on it, the texts you recovered, that was his private communication. You had no legal right to access that. I had every right to protect my daughter from a con artist. That's not how the law works, Ms. Brennan. Sullivan smiled coldly. You can't just break into someone's digital property because you don't like them. I didn't break in. I recovered deleted data from a device my daughter owned. Data that my client had deleted because he assumed it would remain private. Laura stood. Objection. Counsel is testifying. Sustained. Sullivan changed tactics. Ms. Brennan, isn't it true that you never approved of Trevor? That from the moment your daughter started dating him, you tried to break them up? That's not true. Really? Because according to testimony from Trevor's friends, you were constantly making negative comments about him, questioning his career, suggesting Melissa could do better. I had concerns. Concerns that turned out to be completely justified. Or maybe, Sullivan said, stepping closer to the witness stand, maybe you're a controlling mother who couldn't stand that her daughter had found someone and was building a life independent of you. Maybe this entire prosecution is built on evidence you manufactured or manipulated because you want your daughter back under your control. I felt anger flash through me, hot and sharp. But I kept my voice level. Mr. Sullivan, I want my daughter to be happy and safe. Trevor Hayes made her neither of those things. He used her, lied to her, and tried to steal from her. That's not control. That's protection. Protection, Sullivan repeated. Is that what you call breaking into someone's phone? Following him around? Contacting his ex-girlfriends and encouraging them to make false accusations? I didn't encourage anyone to make false accusations. I asked them to tell the truth about their experiences. The truth according to you. The truth according to bank records, police reports, and Trevor's own written words. We went back and forth for another hour. Sullivan tried every angle, suggesting I was obsessed, vindictive, manipulative. But I held my ground. Because everything I'd done for Melissa. And I wasn't ashamed of that. When I finally stepped down from the witness stand, I was exhausted. But I caught Melissa's eye as I walked back to my seat, and she mouthed 2 words, "Thank you." That made it all worth it. The prosecution rested after 2 weeks of testimony. Sullivan's defense case lasted 3 days and consisted mainly of character witnesses who claimed Trevor was a good guy who'd made mistakes, and expert witnesses who tried to poke holes in the financial evidence. But the star of the defense was Trevor himself. Against Sullivan's obvious advice, I could see the lawyer's clenched jaw and tight expression. Trevor insisted on testifying. It was a disaster. Sullivan tried to control the narrative, asking softball questions designed to make Trevor look sympathetic. But under cross-examination from Laura, Trevor's true nature came roaring back to the surface. "Mr. Hayes," Laura said, standing in front of him with her arms crossed. "You testified that you genuinely loved Melissa. Is that correct?" "Yes. I did love her. I still do." "Then why did you text your friend Ray saying, and I quote, 'She's perfect, successful, loaded with family money, and desperate for attention. I give it 6 months before she's completely hooked'?" Trevor's face flushed. That was taken out of context. What context makes that statement acceptable? I was joking around. Guys say stupid things to their friends. It doesn't mean anything. I see. And when you texted, "Once we're married and the old lady kicks it, I'll finally be set for life," was that also a joke? I don't remember saying that exactly. "Mr. Hayes, we have the messages. They've been authenticated by multiple experts. Did you or did you not send these texts?" Trevor looked at Sullivan, who shook his head slightly, a warning to stop digging the hole deeper. But Trevor had never been good at taking advice. "Fine," he snapped. "Yes, I sent them. But you don't understand the pressure I was under. Melissa made more money than me. Her mother looked down on me. I felt like I had to prove I was worth something. Those texts were just me venting my frustrations. By planning to steal your wife's inheritance." "I wasn't planning to steal anything. That money became marital property the moment she inherited it. Actually, under Ohio law, inherited assets remain separate property unless explicitly commingled. You knew that, didn't you?" Trevor's mouth snapped shut. "That's why you tried to get Melissa to sign a post-nuptial agreement giving you access to the funds. Except you made a critical error. You backdated the document and referenced accounts that didn't exist yet. Why did you do that, Mr. Hayes?" "I didn't backdate anything. My lawyer must have gotten the dates wrong." Your lawyer testified that you provided him with a signed document and told him it had been executed in September of 2021. Were you lying to your lawyer? No. I thought. Trevor was floundering, contradicting himself, making excuses that didn't hold water. I watched the jury's faces as he testified, and I saw their expressions harden with each word that came out of his mouth. By the time Laura finished with him, Trevor looked like he'd been hit by a truck. His hair was disheveled from running his hands through it. His shirt was soaked with sweat. And any sympathy the jury might have had for him was completely gone. Closing arguments happened on a Friday afternoon. The courthouse was packed again, even more crowded than opening day. I sat between Melissa and Dorothy, holding Melissa's hand so tightly my fingers went numb. Laura's closing argument was a masterclass in prosecutorial rhetoric. She walked the jury through the entire timeline again, hitting every key piece of evidence, reminding them of every damning text message and financial record. Trevor Hayes is a thief, she said, her voice ringing through the courtroom. Not someone who steals because he's desperate or starving. Someone who steals because he's lazy. Because he thinks he's smarter than everyone else. Because he believes he deserves to live off the hard work of others. She pointed at Trevor. He targeted vulnerable women for over a decade. He lied to them, manipulated them, and stole from them. And when he got caught, he didn't show remorse. He didn't apologize. He threatened witnesses. He violated court orders. He destroyed property. Because Trevor Hayes isn't sorry for what he did. He's only sorry he got caught. She turned back to the jury. You have the power to hold him accountable. You have the power to say that this behavior is not acceptable, that predators like Trevor Hayes will face consequences. I'm asking you to deliver a verdict that protects future victims. A verdict that says enough is enough. Find Trevor Hayes guilty on all counts. Sullivan's closing argument was impassioned but hollow. He tried to paint Trevor as a flawed man who'd made mistakes, tried to suggest the prosecution was overreaching, tried to cast doubt on the evidence. But you could see in his body language that even he didn't believe it anymore. The jury got the case at 4 o'clock on Friday afternoon. Judge Chen told them they could deliberate until 6, then they'd break for the weekend and resume Monday morning. Everyone expected this to take days. Complex fraud cases usually do. Juries need time to go through all the evidence, debate the finer points of law, make sure they're certain. The jury came back in 45 minutes. When the bailiff announced they had a verdict, the courtroom erupted in surprised murmurs. 45 minutes. That was almost unheard of. That's good, right? Melissa whispered to me. A fast verdict is good. Usually, I said. It means they all agreed quickly. But my heart was pounding as the jury filed back in. What if we'd miscalculated? What if Sullivan's doubt casting had worked? What if they'd decided Trevor was just a bad husband and not a criminal? Judge Chen addressed the jury foreman, a middle-aged black man wearing a suit. Has the jury reached a verdict? We have, Your Honor. How do you find the defendant on count 1, theft by deception? We find the defendant guilty. I felt Melissa's hand tighten in mine. On count 2, identity theft. Guilty. On count 3, fraud. Guilty. On count 4, criminal menacing. Guilty. On and on it went. 12 counts. 12 guilty verdicts. When the last one was read, Melissa burst into tears. I pulled her close, my own vision blurring. Behind us, I heard some of the other women crying, Jennifer, Amanda, all the others who'd been brave enough to come forward. Trevor sat motionless at the defense table, his face blank with shock. Sullivan was already packing up his briefcase, his job done, his client's fate sealed. Judge Chen banged her gavel. Mr. Hayes, you've been convicted on all counts. Sentencing will be held 4 weeks from today. Until then, you'll remain in custody without bail. We're adjourned. As the bailiff led Trevor away in handcuffs, he turned and looked back at the gallery. His eyes found mine. And in that moment, I saw everything in his expression: rage, hatred, disbelief that he'd actually lost. I looked back at him steadily, unflinching. And then I smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It wasn't forgiving or sympathetic. It was the smile of a mother who'd protected her child and watched justice be served. Trevor's face twisted with impotent fury. Then he was gone, led through a door that closed with a heavy, final thud. Outside the courthouse, we were mobbed by reporters. Laura handled most of the questions, but she pulled Melissa and me forward to make a statement. Today, justice was served, Melissa said, her voice surprisingly steady despite her tears. Not just for me, but for every woman Trevor Hayes victimized. For every person who's ever been targeted by a financial predator. This verdict sends a message: these crimes have consequences. A reporter shouted out, "What would you say to other victims of relationship fraud?" Melissa looked at me, and I nodded. She turned back to the cameras. "I'd say document everything. Trust your instincts. And don't be ashamed to ask for help. I'm a successful executive with an MBA, and I still fell for Trevor's lies. That's not a reflection on me, it's a reflection on how good these predators are at what they do. But you can fight back. You can win. We did." That night, we had a quiet celebration at my house, just Melissa, Dorothy, Laura, and me. We ordered pizza, drank wine, and for the first time in over a year, we laughed. Real, genuine, joyful laughter. "I can't believe it's over," Melissa said, curled up on my couch with her second glass of wine. "I keep thinking I'm going to wake up and find out it was all a dream." "It's real," I said. "And in 4 weeks, Trevor's going to be sentenced." "Laura, what are we looking at?" Laura swirled her wine. "Given the multiple counts, the pattern of behavior, and his violation of court orders, I'd say 10 to 15 years minimum. Possibly more if Judge Chen wants to make an example of him." 15 years. Trevor would be in his late 50s when he got out. His youth, his charm, his ability to manipulate vulnerable women, all of it would be gone. "Good," Melissa said fiercely. "That's exactly what he deserves." We clinked our glasses together, and in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: peace. The 4 weeks between the verdict and sentencing passed in a strange blur. Life started to return to something resembling normal, or at least, a new version of normal. Melissa moved back into her house permanently. We'd spent weeks cleaning and repairing the damage Trevor had done, replacing the broken dishes and slashed furniture, patching the holes in the walls. She'd repainted the bedroom, a soft sage green instead of the neutral beige it had been before, and bought new furniture. "I want it to feel like mine again," she'd explained. "Not ours. Mine." She went back to work full-time. Her colleagues had been supportive throughout the trial, and her boss had even written a letter for the court describing Melissa's professionalism and character. She threw herself into a new project at work, some kind of supply chain optimization initiative that I didn't fully understand, but that made her eyes light up when she talked about it. She was healing. Slowly, painfully, but genuinely healing. I went back to my own routines, my book club, my volunteer work at the library, my weekly coffee dates with friends. But everything felt different now. I'd spent so many months consumed by the investigation, by the need to protect Melissa, that returning to normal life felt almost surreal. People in our community had started recognizing me from the news coverage. I'd be at the grocery store and someone would approach me, usually women around my age, and say things like, "You're that mother from the trial, aren't you? I just want you to know, you're an inspiration." At first, it made me uncomfortable. I didn't set out to be an inspiration or a public figure. I just wanted to protect my daughter. But then I started getting letters. Actual physical letters, mailed to my house, from women all over Ohio and even other states. Women who'd been in situations similar to Melissa's. Women who'd recognized the warning signs in their own relationships after seeing the news coverage. Women who'd left dangerous situations or reported financial abuse because our story had given them courage. One letter, from a woman in Toledo, read, "I've been married for 12 years to a man who controls all our money. I thought it was normal. I thought I was being paranoid when I suspected he was hiding things from me. But watching your daughter's case, I realized I'm being financially abused. I've contacted a lawyer. I'm getting out. Thank you for showing me it's possible." I cried reading that letter. And I realized that maybe this had all been about more than just Melissa. Maybe it was about every woman who'd ever been manipulated, controlled, or victimized by someone they trusted. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for the last Friday in July. It was another beautiful summer day, the kind of day that should have been. The courtroom was full again, but this time the energy was different. At the verdict, there had been tension, uncertainty, the electric anticipation of not knowing which way things would fall. Today, there was only a sense of inevitability. Trevor Hayes had been found guilty on all 12 counts. Now it was just a matter of how long he'd pay for what he'd done. Judge Chen entered at precisely 9 o'clock. We all stood, and I found myself studying her face, trying to read some hint of what she was thinking. But her expression was impassive, professional, revealing nothing. Trevor was brought in wearing the same orange jumpsuit he'd worn throughout the trial. 4 weeks in county jail had aged him even more. His shoulders were slumped, his face gaunt. The cocky con artist who'd swept my daughter off her feet was completely gone, replaced by this diminished, defeated man. I should have felt triumph, vindication. But mostly, I just felt tired. "We're here for sentencing in the matter of State of Ohio versus Trevor Hayes," Judge Chen said, settling into her seat. "Mr. Hayes, please stand." Trevor rose slowly, Sullivan beside him. For once, the lawyer looked genuinely somber. "Mr. Hayes, you've been convicted of 12 felony counts spanning fraud, theft, identity theft, and criminal menacing. Before I impose sentence, the law allows for victim impact statements. Ms. Mitchell, does the state have witnesses who wish to speak?" Laura stood. "We do, Your Honor. 7 victims have prepared statements." Judge Chen nodded. "We'll hear from them now." One by one, the women Trevor had victimized took the stand. Jennifer went first, describing how she'd almost lost her medical license, how she'd spent years rebuilding her credit, how she still had nightmares about opening her mailbox and finding collection notices. Amanda talked about the shame she'd felt, the way she'd blamed herself for being stupid enough to fall for Trevor's lies. "I'm a smart woman," she said, her voice breaking. "I have a master's degree. I run my own business now. But for years, I couldn't trust myself to make decisions because Trevor had convinced me I was the problem." One after another, they told their stories. Each one was different in the details but identical in the pattern. Trevor had found them when they were vulnerable, gained their trust, and stolen from them. And each one had spent years dealing with the financial and emotional aftermath. Finally, it was Melissa's turn. She walked to the witness stand with her head high, wearing a navy suit that made her look every inch the successful executive she was. But I could see her hands trembling as she placed them on the wooden railing. "Your Honor," she began, her voice steady despite the emotion I could hear underneath it. "Trevor Hayes didn't just steal money from me. He stole time. He stole trust. He stole my ability to believe in my own judgment." She turned to look directly at Trevor. He wouldn't meet her eyes. "I loved you," Melissa said. "I genuinely, truly loved you. I would have done anything for you. I would have supported you through hard times, helped you build a career, stood by you when things were difficult. But you never wanted a partner. You wanted a mark." Her voice hardened. "You saw me as nothing more than a paycheck. An inheritance you could steal. And when I found out the truth, when I tried to leave, you tried to destroy me. You broke into my house and destroyed everything I valued. You threatened my mother. You violated court orders because you couldn't stand the idea that I was finally free of you." She took a breath. "But here's what you didn't count on. I'm stronger than you thought. My mother is fiercer than you imagined. And justice, real justice, actually exists." Melissa looked back at the judge. "Your Honor, I'm asking you to impose the maximum sentence allowed by law. Not because I'm vindictive, but because Trevor Hayes is a danger to any woman who makes the mistake of trusting him. He's spent over a decade perfecting his predatory behavior. If he's released too soon, he'll do this again. I'm certain of it." She stepped down and returned to her seat beside me. I squeezed her hand, pride swelling in my chest so powerfully I thought I might burst with it. Judge Chen made notes on her pad, then looked up. "Mr. Sullivan, does your client wish to make a statement?" Sullivan stood. "He does, Your Honor." Trevor rose slowly and walked to stand before the judge. For a long moment, he just stood there, his head bowed. Then he spoke. "Your Honor, I know I messed up. I know I hurt people. I didn't set out to be a bad person, but somewhere along the way, I lost myself. I made terrible choices. I hurt women who trusted me. And I'm sorry. I'm genuinely sorry." He turned to face the gallery, looking at the women he'd victimized. "Jennifer, Amanda, Melissa, all of you, I'm sorry. I can't undo what I did, but I want you to know that I understand now how wrong it was. How much pain I caused. If I could go back and do things differently, I would. It was a good performance, I had to admit. The right words, delivered with the right amount of contrition. If I hadn't known him, hadn't seen his true nature, I might have even believed he meant it. But I'd read those text messages. I'd seen how he'd coldly calculated each relationship, each theft. And I knew that Trevor Hayes was incapable of genuine remorse. He was only sorry he'd been caught. Judge Chen studied him for a long moment. Then she spoke, and her voice was like ice. Mr. Hayes, I've been a judge for 17 years. In that time, I've seen every kind of criminal you can imagine. Violent offenders, drug dealers, white-collar fraudsters. And I've learned to distinguish between defendants who are genuinely remorseful and those who are simply sorry they got caught. She leaned forward. You, Mr. Hayes, fall firmly into the second category. Your apology rings hollow because your actions after being caught demonstrate no remorse whatsoever. You violated protective orders. You threatened witnesses. You destroyed property. You showed up in this courtroom and tried to manipulate these proceedings the same way you manipulated these women. Trevor's face went pale. The pre-sentencing report indicates you've shown no acceptance of responsibility. You've blamed your victims for your crimes. You've suggested they're exaggerating or lying. You've demonstrated that if given the opportunity, you would continue this pattern of behavior. Judge Chen picked up a document from her desk. The sentencing guidelines for your crimes suggest 8 to 12 years in prison. The prosecution has requested 15 years. Your defense has requested the minimum. She looked directly at Trevor. I'm going to impose a sentence of 18 years in the Ohio Department of Corrections, with credit for time served. Additionally, you will be required to pay full restitution to all victims, a total of approximately $423,000. Upon release, you will be on supervised probation for an additional 5 years. The courtroom erupted in gasps and murmurs. 18 years. Trevor would be 57 years old when he got out. His entire adult life, wasted. Furthermore, Judge Chen continued, raising her voice over the noise, I'm ordering that your case be referred to the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. Based on the evidence presented at trial, I believe your crimes may cross state lines, which would make them federal offenses. That investigation will be separate from these proceedings. She banged her gavel. Bailiff, remove the defendant. We're adjourned. Trevor stood frozen for a moment, the enormity of the sentence sinking in. Then he turned and looked back at the gallery one last time. His eyes swept over the women he'd victimized, over Laura and Dorothy, over Melissa. And finally, his gaze landed on me. I looked back at him steadily, refusing to look away. And I saw the exact moment when he finally understood. He'd lost. Completely, utterly, irreversibly. The bailiff touched his arm, and Trevor shuffled toward the door, his movements mechanical, robotic. Just before he disappeared through the doorway, I heard him say something, so quiet I almost missed it. I would have made her happy. And despite everything, despite all the pain he'd caused, all the lives he'd damaged, all the evil he'd done, I almost felt sorry for him in that moment. Because he actually believed it. Trevor Hayes genuinely believed that stealing from someone, lying to them, using them, was somehow compatible with making them happy. He was more broken than I'd realized. Then the door closed behind him, and he was gone. The courtroom emptied slowly. People came up to Melissa and me, congratulating us, thanking us, telling us we'd done an important thing. Jennifer and Amanda and the other women hugged us, tears streaming down their faces. Outside, there were more reporters, more cameras, more questions. But Laura handled most of it, and eventually we escaped to my car. Melissa and I sat in the parking garage for a long time, neither of us speaking, just breathing in the silence and the sense of finality. It's really over, Melissa finally said. He's going to prison for 18 years. It's actually over. Yes, I said. It is. She turned to look at me, and her eyes were bright with tears. Mom, I don't think I ever properly thanked you. For everything you did. The investigation, the evidence, standing up in court, all of it. You saved me. Sweetheart, you saved yourself. I just gave you the tools. No. She shook her head firmly. You did so much more than that. You believed me when I might not have believed myself. You fought for me when I was too broken to fight. You refused to let him win. She reached over and took my hand. I know I wasn't always easy about it. I know there were times when I was angry at you for pushing, for investigating, for not just letting it go. But you were right. About everything. And I'm so grateful. I couldn't speak past the lump in my throat, so I just squeezed her hand and nodded. We sat there until the sun started to set, painting the concrete walls of the parking garage in shades of gold and orange. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like we could finally move forward. Not move on. What Trevor had done would always be part of our story. But move forward, into whatever came next. That was 3 months ago. Today, Melissa is thriving. She got a promotion at work, senior vice president, with a corner office and a team of 30 people reporting to her. She started dating again, carefully and cautiously, with a therapist's help and my full support. She's even talking about maybe adopting a dog. The other women Trevor victimized have been rebuilding their lives too. Jennifer paid off the last of her debt and bought a house. Amanda expanded her business and hired 3 new employees. Each of them is moving forward, stronger for having survived Trevor's predation. As for me, I've become something of an accidental advocate. I've been speaking at domestic violence centers and women's organizations about financial abuse and relationship fraud. I've helped 3 other women navigate similar situations with their own Trevor Hayes. And I've learned that predators like him are far more common than anyone wants to admit. But I've also learned that we're stronger than they are. That mothers, daughters, sisters, friends, we protect each other. We fight for each other. And when we stand together, we win. The manila envelope I carried into that courtroom is in a box in my closet now, along with all the other documents from the case. Sometimes I take it out and look through it, remembering that period of intense focus and determination. Remembering the woman I became when my daughter needed me. Gerald's photo is still on the mantle. Sometimes I talk to him, telling him about everything that happened. I like to think he'd be proud of me. Proud of Melissa. Proud that we stood up and fought back. And Trevor. He's serving his sentence in Marion Correctional Institution. According to the Department of Corrections website, his earliest possible release date is 2041. He'll be 57 years old. His charm will be gone. His youth will be gone. His ability to manipulate vulnerable women will be gone. He sent Melissa a letter a few weeks ago. She brought it to me unopened, and we burned it together in my fireplace without reading it. Whatever he had to say, whatever manipulation he was trying now, we didn't need to hear it. We're done with Trevor Hayes. If you've watched this entire story unfold, if you've stayed with me through all 10 chapters, I want to say thank you. Thank you for witnessing our journey. Thank you for caring about what happened to my daughter and to all the other women Trevor hurt. And if you see yourself in this story, if you recognize the warning signs in your own relationship, if you're dealing with your own Trevor Hayes, please know this, you're not alone. You're not crazy. You're not overreacting. Trust your instincts. Document everything. Ask for help. And remember that sometimes, the person who saves you is yourself. You just need someone to believe in you while you find your strength. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories like this one. Comment and let me know where you're watching from, and share your own experiences if you feel safe doing so. Check the description below for resources on financial abuse, relationship fraud, and domestic violence. Because every time we share these stories, every time we speak the truth about predators like Trevor Hayes, we make it a little bit harder for them to operate in the shadows. We shine a light. And in that light, they can't hide. This is Patricia Brennan, signing off. Stay strong, stay vigilant, and remember, you're worth fighting for.